Hello and welcome to Mooks and Monsters. I'm Rob Ward.
And I'm Tim Niederreiter, and this is episode 123 of the podcast.
Today we're going to be talking about something a little different than what we usually do. In this podcast, we usually focus on the intricacies of running a game, of developing a good story, of managing players. This one, we're going to go a little more meta. This is about hosting the game itself. What does that mean? That means, finding a location to run the game, having all your stuff prepared, getting ready to deal with whatever is thrown your way. Because thank we can thankfully we live in a time where if we really wanted the game, we could meet over Skype or Hangouts or whatever. But sometimes, we want a little bit more face-to-face interactions. Tim, how do you usually run a game?
Well, my ambition is to start running more remotely, but lately I run games out of my house. I have a pretty nice game room, but that's about the extent of my accommodations. Anyway. But I have my most recent game I ran over at a friend's house, a friend's apartment, where that was in January, and that was fun. But it was also a little weird, primarily because one of these other things we'll get into, which was actually alcohol. Not that that's a specific topic, but food and drink for sure. And I generally play in a pretty much in a private location, a house of somebody in the group.
Now, I really like playing and running games in private locations. In college, we had they just built a new building by the time I was a sophomore, and they had all these really nice rooms that in a place called Beck Hall, and we would be able to push a button and the blinds would shut. We can have projections. It was that's my ideal game room right there. Something like what you'd see in Beck. Big table, lots of seats. You can hone the lighting in.
Yeah, they really were perfect game rooms.
Oh yeah, and I mean just like the amount of using projections too, like in a PowerPoint, makes so much. I'd say it gives a lot of emphasis to the game itself.
Good options there.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I do prefer, if I can, I do try to run stuff. I'm still kind of trying to figure stuff out in my house, so it's been a little off kilter lately. But this latest Cthulhu campaign that I considered wrapped up because my players are now tied up with a monster in a room. No real. It's not like a hard you're gonna die, but
it's a Bolivian Army ending. Yeah, it's like the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid Bolivian Army ending.
Exactly. It's very much that way. But I run this game mostly in the lobby of a local theater in town, just because two of the players worked at the theater, so they needed to be in the building to watch out for stuff. So I would play out in the lobby there, which usually was very good. But it brings up our first thing, distractions. Distractions, you want to keep them to a minimum. Sometimes it's just you might have a very friendly cat. Maybe you have a roommate that's being a little too loud. Maybe you have, just a show that got out. And so people are talking. So you have to really plot out what type of game you're going to run there. For mine, my game was a little more casual, if that made sense.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So people can come and go. That we talked about that a little bit in the revolving door episode on a larger level. Mm-hmm. Even at a micro level, you've got to be aware that it's not going to be super atmospheric necessarily, which could be an inhibition for a game like Call of Cthulhu. But but if you can work around it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're all busy. We all have lives. Um, I would say for atmosphere, you want to get somewhere, more private, more secluded, um, where you have more control over the environment.
Hmm.
I'd say that gives a little bit better atmosphere. Um, but as far as but sometimes you just have to deal with the cards you've been handled. Um, so I had to run my in a theater, and most of the time it worked out really well because there was a lot of space. There was comfy couches we could sit on. Um, Usually people brought snacks. One time we did run a couple in a coffee shop, which was it was interesting because one of my friends actually worked at the coffee shop or was managing it. So she was like, "Hey, why don't we? Can we do the game here?" And it was like, "Oh, okay." And so when it was quiet, it was pretty nice because we had coffee. But one day it just got so busy that it was like, oh fuck.
It gets loud in those places.
Oh yeah, and just people were coming in and out, and just like our player had to just keep on jumping up and get taking care of it because I mean she's getting paid to do it. That's her job.
Right.
But it was just like, and she actually apologized at the end. She's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened." I was just like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." We wrapped it up pretty nicely. Um, because they all got caught anyway.
No
Yeah.
players will escape.
But yeah, it's just as a game master, you have to be aware of what the environment's pluses and negatives are.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a huge thing, and also kind of like some, like you're saying with the coffee shop, it's kind of like if if you're playing at a coffee shop, say in the morning, well then by lunchtime, a lot of times it's going to get super crowded and loud, and that can be like a kind of time limit you have, and time limits are
Hmm.
really an issue in public places. Uh,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. Of course, they can be also player related, but here we're really just talking about environmentally related ones.
Hmm.
Though, to be honest, having a short time frame for a game, we kind of cover that other times, but it can be a huge factor, and it can really determine where you want to play. Because if you're playing for only an hour, it might be fine just to be in a coffee shop. That might always work if you're only going to play for an hour or two at a time.
Yeah. Well, another thing that kind of influenced that was in both cases with the theater and the coffee shop, I knew people that had a managerial role or were in charge of the place.
Hmm.
So that gives a different dynamic because they're actually hosting, if anything.
Right. It's a kind of a
Um,
co-host thing because you're running the
yeah,
game, but the host is somebody else. That's a good point.
I would be very I'd be very vigilant about going to just a normal coffee shop that you don't know anybody, just
Yeah.
public
Don't just
space.
go into
And
Starbucks.
yeah, that might just be, it might cause too many distractions. People are trying to get work done. um
Hmm.
or like what was that one script thing that we read years and years ago about the guy that kept on running games and his everyone in his party was just a bunch of doofuses.
Oh, that was Al Bruno the Third or AB3 and his worst adventuring party ever or something like that. I think that's still online. People can go find it.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious, and I'd like to put it on stage one day. Um, but there's a one of those scenes where he's in a restaurant and trying to run the game, and it's just going to hell, and
Hmm.
like the waitress is getting pissed at him. Everyone's not very comfortable. They're getting crap all over the supplies. So I'd be very cautious. Normal game stores though, they have big tables that you can go and hang out and play a game in, which is
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, comic
Um,
book shops too. I'll have
oh
them.
yeah, absolutely. So they're set up for stuff like that. Um, but yeah, those are like as far as environmental things, those are things you have to be very aware of. I'd
Yes.
also say like coming prepared. You have
Mm.
your notes, you have pencils, you have paper,
Dice, of
you have
course.
your dice. I started bringing a whiteboard.
Oh, that's smart. Like a little
Yeah,
portable one, obviously. Yeah.
yeah, a little small one, so I could like just draw out. I could just wipe it off and just be like, okay, here's where everything is in the location, and I'd be able to just show them visually where everyone was in reference to each other.
Yeah, and that'd
Um,
be really cool. It'd be a good kind of cheaper way to do like a battle mat thing too. If you're doing a game, drawing the scenery. If you're playing with miniatures or something.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't playing with miniatures, but I was definitely just kind of showing like a aerial view of the surrounding area.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
yeah, and I, bring the books as well so people can reference them.
Yeah, I think having multiple copies because usually I game off of a computer now because I have a lot of my books in PDF form,
Hmm.
and my Kindle is just too slow to handle a PDF like that on in a reasonable fashion. But often when I've run a game lately, I have the print book, I have the PDF copy on my Kindle, and this is kind of my ideal setup. And then I have another PDF copy on my computer in case and even though referencing rules isn't that important, that's more of a character creation stage thing.
Hmm.
So then everyone can have a copy of the book on some level, or two or three people can have it instead of just one person.
Yeah.
Uh, but as far as it goes, normally I think it's obviously more important than that all players should have a set of their own dice. When I'm running mutants and masterminds, that means they have one d20. It's really simple. But in the case of something like Call of Cthulhu, you'll need at least two d10 and some other dice to go with it for everybody in case of combat.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and then you can get by with less, but it's nice if every player can just have their own set of dice to use. For me, that's not an issue. I have tons of dice. I'm for my wargaming and long time role playing, but it is kind of an interesting situation to be in when, and I should say interesting. I mean, it's not very good if players have to, pass the dice around every time a roll has to be made, and it can be a problem.
Hmm. I, I just realized as a game master, as I keep on playing, I keep on accumulating more dice. Just because sometimes, like, people give me dice. Sometimes I'll be in a store and I'll be like, oh, okay, I could use another, like, D10.
Yeah, yeah. I
And,
just recently,
just,
sorry,
hmm.
go on. I just
Well,
recently,
yeah.
the last few years, I just got a bunch of D10s from this one Kickstarter, and that now I'm like, wow, I
Oh,
should just play. I should run some Cyberpunk. It's all D10s, basically.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty much, percentile dice for Call of Cthulhu. That's,
True. Yeah, you
yeah,
need
a
to.
lot of D10s. Um, I do find it funny when people kind of are, because I play with some people that don't really like play a lot of games
Hmm.
sometimes. A couple of ours are pretty hardcore gamers, but I usually make sure to bring that big bag of dice.
No, that's
Um,
that's generally good. I kind of see that as my responsibility as a game master. I have enough dice for everyone, and if they bring their
mhm,
own, that's fine. I mean, that's good too.
yeah. Um, yeah, I'm one of those game masters that like to keep the character sheets.
Me too.
Yeah, because just if people forget it, then you're kind of up the creek.
Yeah.
But and again, that all depends on like who you are as a game master and who your players are.
Hmm.
Um, but I usually keep them.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think I tend to have a digital copy as well. Like I said, I usually use a computer to run the game, or I keep my notes on there. So yeah, so and a computer, it's interesting because a computer can be really a problem during a game. I wouldn't let a player character use a player use a character use a computer during the game. Player characters
Hmm.
can, obviously. The players, I think it becomes more of a problem. I've definitely been in games where a player was actually playing a video game at the RPG table,
Oh yeah,
and that's a pain. because then they're not engaged with the game. That's a
Yeah, they're
level
not.
of unengagement, which is just ridiculous. It's like, are you even here? You know?
Yeah, I like to keep. I don't even bring my computer to the games just
Mm,
because. Even if, I mean, I'd rather just print out the manual at that point. I mean, sometimes you just can't because that's just a lot of paper.
yeah.
But I tend to just bring my books. I tend to bring my paper, my notes, my paper notes. And I also, if I do type anything up, I usually print it out. But I also use my phone for
Mm,
one. I use it for Google Maps
okay.
because usually I play in real life settings, um, in real life locations. So people ask me, how long is that drive going to take us? And I could just pull up Google Maps and I could just be like, oh, it's going to take you about this long.
That's
And
cool. Yeah.
it'd be like, oh, okay. But since it was, this game takes place 10 years ago, it's going to be like it's like going to be an hour longer just because the
Hmm.
roads weren't as crisp.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think using I actually wouldn't like I wouldn't really, and I think it's okay if players have their phones at the table too. This is
Hmm.
kind of veering into I think this is still distractions, but I think it's also but it really is good if the GM has some kind of way to access the internet. I think that's really important, especially in a game like you said, which uses real world locations and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
And have be ready to go out to when you're confronted with a question. Um, I would either okay. Here's the story. I was playing D&D, and
mm,
one of our players was a Naga snake person,
okay,
and they decided to take a piss on an ant.
okay.
So yeah, it was super weird, and apparently there's some acidity with Naga urine apparently. So my game master actually called one of his friends who
Mm.
played a lot more D&D to figure out what the damage would be
Well,
against
that's a
an
corner
ant.
case for sure. But yeah.
And in that occasion, it was just such an outlandish thing. I did not mind
Hmm.
that the game kind of come to a pause because we all were engaged in getting the answer to this question. But sometimes I just rather go with my gut on something.
Yeah,
Oh
generally I wouldn't. Yeah, that the phone
yeah,
call is pretty extreme. It's a pretty extreme way to GM. Call someone else
it
for a
is, yeah,
reference.
but it was entertaining enough and
Hmm.
engaging enough that was cool. But if it was something um, I got hit with this, but there's something in the way, but there's something here.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean the object of the game is not to get it perfectly right. The object of the game is to have fun.
yeah, and not getting bogged down is part of having fun. So, but yeah, we are running a little low on time right now. So, anything else you want to say about hosting the game? Because this we could really do a little bit more, but uh,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean
I think we covered a lot.
yeah, well, put yourself in your player's shoes, and
Mm,
would you be more comfortable? Like, I'm not a people person, so I don't want to be in a like public space more than I have to.
hmm.
But sometimes you just, if you do have to use a public space, what kind of public space behooves you? Um, but yeah, just be a good host.
Yeah, definitely be the host of the most dice, the most stuff, whatever. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, this has been of Mooks and Monsters. You can find us on at podcast at mental cell you can email us at podcast at mentalcellarpublications.com. You could find our archive at mentalcellarpublications.com. You could find it, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. I'm at Stagehead, Tim's at D Niederreiter. We are hosted by Lipson.
That's about it. Thanks for listening, everybody.